District of Conservation is sponsored by the Committee for a Constructive Tomorrow, better known as CFACT. To learn more about our sponsor, head over to cfact.org. Thanks for listening to the program.
This episode is brought to you by Experian. Are you paying for subscriptions you don't use, but can't find the time or energy to cancel them? Experian could cancel unwanted subscriptions for you, saving you an average of $270 per year and plenty of time. Download the Experian app. Results will vary. Not all subscriptions are eligible. Savings are not guaranteed. Paid membership with connected payment account required.
Welcome to District of Conservation. I am your host, Gabriella Hoffman. This podcast offers a sober examination into all things hunting, fishing, shooting sports, energy, environment, and the public policy surrounding it. And this podcast also specializes in original interviews that you won't hear elsewhere. Here's what I have for you today. If you're a trout bum here in the Southeast, especially Virginia, I think you're going to really like today's interview. Our conversation is with Ty Walker of Smokin' Chimneys. It's going to tie in a little bit of hatchery trout raising, farm to table, fly fishing, and conservation, and how those are all intertwined in his operations. I first was alerted to him when reading a profile on his operation in Garden and Gun a few years ago. I was very intrigued by the article, and I thought to myself, I kind of put it in the back burner. I have to somehow get in touch with him, his family, their operation, because they're here in Virginia. They're in Newcastle, which is near Roanoke. And they're doing something that I think kind of challenges conventional wisdom. Obviously, they have rehabilitated an old 1930s Department of Interior trout hatchery. They now sell directly to chefs and others who are interested in having fresh farm-raised trout. You'll hear a different take about the debate over eating and consuming trout from hatcheries, because there is a debate right now taking place over whether or not having hatchery-stocked trout and introducing those into streams is detrimental to wild trout, native trout. We do have this debate, but more importantly, I really like the mission statement, and I think you will too. And their website says that our desire at Smokin' Chimneys is to figuratively put the smoke back into the chimneys, or in other words, bring life back to the land physically and spiritually. How could you not like that message? You might hear some background noise in our interview because Ty was in the DC area for business meetings. We met at one of my favorite coffee shops in Old Town Alexandria because he has some vendors there. And at some point, I think Ty was very insistent that I come down to visit their operation. So we will hopefully engage with him more. But I think you'll really like this agribusiness here in Virginia and what they're doing and how innovative they are. So I'll let Ty take it away from here, and you guys will get to know more about Smokin' Chimneys.
Hi, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast in person.
Thanks so much for having me.
I first caught whiff of you from reading a Garden and Gun profile about your company. And a lot of people have taken an interest. I think Filson and all these other kind of outdoor lifestyle brands have really taken an interest in what you guys are doing. So give a backstory for my listeners, how you came to be, your background, and what led you to start Smokin' Chimneys.
Okay, so hi, I'm Ty Walker. I operate Smokin' Chimneys. We are a revitalized 1930s trout hatchery where we are raising trout from eggs that go to restaurants all across the Mid-Atlantic. That's kind of the meat and potatoes of what we do. I grew up on a farm, went to college, we farmed in Oregon, came back, kind of revitalized my grandparents' farm. That's where we got the name Smokin' Chimneys. There's some old 1800s dated stone chimneys there, and as we're getting the farm back going, it was just kind of metaphorically like, we're putting smoke like back in the old chimneys, so. And then we had an opportunity. I got a call one day. My friend was like, man, Ty, there's this trout hatchery in Newcastle. And I'm like, where's Newcastle? Don't know where it is. I grew up fly fishing my whole life, but fly fishing and raising 50,000 trout are two totally different things. So visited the hatchery. There was no water on. I was like, bro, is this even a trout hatchery? I mean, you just have all these empty ponds, and it was one of those, what am I doing? My wife, Shannon, was like, this is ridiculous. This is not a good idea. Nobody was really in favor of it. But over like a period of like 2 weeks, we just felt like, dude, this is for us, and we're going to give this thing a shot. So we're going into our 5th year being there, our 3rd year of actually having a product to bring to market. So yes, it has been a journey indeed.
How do people discover Smoking Chimneys, and what are some of the clientele that you have? Like, I think a lot of people listening live here in the Washington, D.C. area, although we do cater to the whole country. But for my D.C. listeners, like some of the restaurants you guys supply trout to, they're pretty well known. So, like, can you list a few?
Yeah, sure. So, let me think here. Let me back up 1 second. One of my goals with getting this trout to market was like, trout has been so bastardized, and Virginia imports 90% of their trout from either Idaho or North Carolina. So a goal of mine was to raise the best tasting, best looking trout possible, emulating a wild trout, and getting that trout in the nicest, best, most sought after restaurants in the region. So that was kind of my aim. So the restaurant scene is pretty difficult to crack, but it's awesome that we're at the Dabney here in DC. We're at Albee in Navy Yard, Vermilion here in Old Town Alexandria, and quite a few other places. We ship the fish to New York City, DC every week, so it's a big process. We harvest fish every Monday, chill the fish, and then ship all the fish next day UPS on Tuesdays. So it's cool to like go to another town, and then I get to like eat the trout that I harvest the last, I don't know, it's just a cool, it's a whole different setting. I mean, I'm sitting around like, I don't know any of these people, and you're in this nice restaurant, and then they bring a Smoking Chimneys trout out. It's definitely like a rewarding process, yeah.
And did you learn how to do farming or a subset of farming in your schooling? So were you able to apply like previous knowledge to the work that you do in Smoking Chimneys?
Well, okay, my dad is in sales, my brother's in sales, so I had like, in high school I'm like selling deer jerky to kids, and just that kind of thing, just like sales. But the trout process has been a very steep learning curve. We've definitely killed more fish than what we've raised, probably. Just trying to get it going was very difficult. It's all gravity fed. It's from the 1930s. There's old cast iron pipes and valves, and it was just, and there's not many resources, you like we have one pretty popular video. I'm like, if you go to YouTube and type in like, how to start a trout hatchery, there's really nothing there. There's content there, but it's so far from actual tacit knowledge of actually doing it that the information really isn't helpful. I found a book from the 1930s on eBay. It was about a guy in upstate New York raising trout. I bought the book. I'm reading, I'm like, man, this is amazing. Because everything he's saying is making sense, because his system was similar to mine. It was written during the same era. So a lot of that old information has been vital, and it was vital in just kind of getting our operation off the ground.
How does your hatchery differ from, let's say, like a state wildlife hatchery? Is there a different process? Because trout, I think most people know, I like to fly fish. I talk about fly fishing for trout often. And even with my basic knowledge of how that whole process goes, trout love highly oxygenated water. So is it a little different than what the state hatcheries do, or do you guys have a different method in place at Smoking Chimneys?
State hatcheries primarily now are all, even if it may be an open system, which means fresh water comes in, water leaves and goes back into a creek or whatever. Most of the facilities now are all concrete, so trout are very fragile. Trout living their life in concrete, rubbing up against it. By the stage they reach a harvest size or maturation, they don't look so hot, and And a lot of the hatcheries will use, because they need to meet certain quotas, they use liquid oxygen that they pump into the water. So that kind of supercharges the water so they can put double or triple more fish in there, which is fine. We use neither of those. We have a couple concrete raceways that we use for sorting, but all of our fish are raised in earthen ponds. The advantage of using an earthen pond system is a pond is an ecosystem in and of itself. There's no ecosystem in a concrete box. In a pond, you've got you have the microbiology living in there. You have different grasses growing. A lot of the waste from the fish is being, it's feeding the plants that are growing in the pond, and it really, and if there's an issue or some sort of bacteria, the pond kind of serves as like a buffer for the fish, where if you have a problem with a sickness or something in a concrete raceway, there's nothing to absorb any of that, and the fish take the full impact of whatever's going on. Does that make sense?
That makes sense, yeah. It's a little different. I have seen off of your guys' social media what your facility does and how it differentiates from a state wildlife hatchery. And it's not diminishing the work of the state wildlife hatcheries. It's just probably you guys are able to do things more creatively, and you see certain aspects of rearing trout work better for you, and maybe the hatcheries do things a little differently within each individual state. But what has been the impact of the surrounding region, too, with the facility, the improved technology that you guys have been using, or the restoration of kind of the infrastructure there?
It's really interesting that, so the water comes into our facility, into our hatchery building, into our raceways or ponds, and then goes back into a creek. We have, so at the end of each pond is a big kind of bed of pond grass that collects, like I'd mentioned, collects a lot of the waste. There's another bed of the same grass in the creek, but it's amazing that, when we think of, I'm trying not to freak out here, but when we think of conservation, a lot of our mindsets are like, we don't like organic matter in waterways. But if you look at nature, you look at the salmon runs, you have millions of salmon swimming upstream and dying and rotting at the headwaters of these major river systems. But if we look at that, we're like, why is that? Well, all that organic matter is feeding the microbiology in that whole river system for an entire year. You kind of get where I'm going with this? Like, we have this really, we've been kind of fed this narrative on, like we got a comment yesterday. It's like, what's your waste management system? And it's like, what's a waste management system like on the prairie? Like, the buffalo poop on the ground and then they stomp it. Like,
same with cows.
Yeah,
and how they regenerate.
Yeah. So it's like, but, and I was telling my friend the other day, I was like, what grass grows better? The grass with the chicken poop on it, or the grass with the no chicken poop? The chicken poop. So it's just interesting. It's the same thing in a river system, or in our sense, we're adding organic matter to a creek, but if it's in balance, you actually improve the health. Does that make sense?
Natural-based solutions.
Yes,
I feel like that's what this would be typified as.
Well, say I screw up all my ponds. I can't move to another 5 acres and just start over. I have to manage these ponds in my area in a way that can hopefully go on as long as I want to do it, or my kids, or whatever. So it works because I am self-motivated, because A, it's what I love to do, B, it's my business. The means justify the ends, because I need to keep the ecosystem intact, the water clean. I need to be able to check all the boxes. Does that make sense? Because there's no go down the road and start over. There's only a handful of these facilities left, so we're trying to be good stewards of the resources we have.
We talked offline before recording the podcast that you kind of have this vision that you hope that other kind of defunct facilities, hatcheries, kind of follow the same path that yours did. what does that kind of plan look like, and is it feasible, you think? Is there an interest among people like yourself to do this outside of Virginia too?
I mean, we were hiring here long ago, and it's like people look at our social media and like, wow, Ty, the Trout. But it's like, dude, it's a lot of like hard manual work, and we live in an era where, especially like millennials, and it's just like they want to do something big and sexy and glamorous, and like this
without the hard work, yeah.
And this just isn't. This is moments of like eating at the restaurant and fun and this and the podcast, but 90% of it is like you're gutting clean fish, or you're cleaning out ponds or whatever. What were you at? What did you ask? I can't remember.
The hatchery model. Would you like to see others?
No, dude, it's dude, if I can do it, and I mean, I graduated college with a 2.9 GPA. I mean, my goodness, if I can do this thing, like, it can be done. And I think, because think about if you wanted to start a new hatchery and you went to your local state or local government, you're like, hey, I want to like divert this creek into a bunch of ponds and raceways and raise fish. Like, it couldn't be done with DEQ and the regs and red tape and blah blah blah. It wouldn't be done. Mm-hmm. So a lot of these old facilities are all like grandfathered in. So once they go down for the count, they're gone. So I would like to see a renaissance of inland seafood here in America.
Explain that, if you can.
Just look at like a map. Like, how much of our country is rural or inland? It's a lot. And we have the capabilities to, there's 2,800 miles of wild trout water just here in Virginia.
Yep.
What if there was initiative to, and it's funny because people are like, anyway, I'll back up. I'm not going to go down a rabbit trail. Wild fish stocks are at all-time lows. Salmon runs are collapsing. Wild fish are down 90%. Aquaculture is the future of seafood. And it's funny that there's so many people that are like, wow, I don't eat farm fish. What if I saw a cow in a field at a farm and was like, I don't eat cows from farms? Like, that would be stupid, right? Because there's no wild, like, we don't all live off wild animal meat. We couldn't. We have to have farms. But it's funny that people are anti-fish farm, but they're not anti-other animal farm, And it's like, why is that? Because fish farms have been they've been so mismanaged that most of the sentiment of people, of consumers, are anti-fish farms, and rightfully so. But that's why we've spent so much time and energy on content, on education, on awareness, to show, hey, it doesn't have to be like this. Mm-hmm. We have a fish farm. We have events. We're drinking the water. We're making beer out of the water. We're open door policy. Like, let's go down this road a ways, Does that make sense?
And I think people want to know where their food, especially fish, comes from. And you guys had showcased recently on social media the difference in quality of trout meat. Most trout that is sold in stores doesn't have that beautiful kind of lush red meat that a trout or a salmon should boast. It's very like off orange, kind of ugly. But you showed that the quality of meat of really good trout, even farm-raised trout, has to be darker, has a darker complexion. And do you think people, when they see that contrast, they know that, okay, maybe I can shed any misconceptions I had about farm-raised trout?
Yeah, well, here in D.C., Jeremiah, the executive chef at the Dabney, got to sit down with him. He was like, Ty, to be honest with you, I haven't been excited about trout in 10 years. So, that being said, why would he not be excited about trout? Well, when you're a Michelin star restaurant, the quality has got to be there. Well, the quality isn't there when you can go to Kroger and pay $3 for a trout fillet. Where am I going with this? A pork chop you get from Food Line, and a pork chop you get from your local farm that has a pastured pork operation, they're apples and oranges. They're two totally different products. You know, like ground beef at Walmart is what, $4 a pound, and you know, at Polyface or White Oak Pastures it's $12. You know, and it's two totally different products. So trying to show the difference between a fish that's raised with...
Let's pause that for just a second. Okay, resume.
Some of the feedback we've gotten, which is really meaningful, is feedback like, wow, I used to like catch and eat wild trout with my grandpa, like back when I was a kid, and I haven't eaten trout like this in 30 years. You know, like that's the feedback we're going for. The days of eating wild seafood, even wild trout. I mean, it's a wonder there's a wild trout anywhere. I personally don't eat wild trout just out of...
Because they're really small.
They're small, and it's just my own personal just conviction. I'm just not going to do it for the principle of it. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people, like, I mean, we got negative comments today. People don't like that I fly fish. You know, we're part of the Yeti program, Sims, Filson, which are all these outdoor conservation-minded brands. But then I have a trout hatchery where I'm gutting and cleaning 500 or 600 trout every Monday. Like, the narrative has been, the narrative is a world of hatcheries and a world of wild fish are in two totally different universes.
It doesn't have to be that way, though.
Well, it doesn't, because, dude, I'm in both, and I'm doing it. I'm just not talking about it or whatever.
You should talk more about it, because
I'm saying synergy. I'm not trying to get an attitude. It's just like, dude, what I'm doing, actually doing, like, our ecosystem, our native rainbow trout population in our creek is flourishing because of the hatchery. You can be like, no, it's not, whatever. Dude, I live at 22499 Cumberland Gap Road, Newcastle, Virginia. You can come see it for yourself. But people want to think, if people fly fish, they think they're the experts on trout just because they fly fish. And that's why, I don't know, I'm not going to get into fly fishing right now, but...
That's a whole other topic, but yeah.
Do you understand the sentiment differences?
Of course, and I'm like you, even as someone who's a consumer and a recreationist, I don't think the conservation concerns have to be pitted against the, how would you say, the consumptive behavior. And I've talked to farmers, I've talked to ranchers, I've talked to hunters, anglers, everyone, and everyone agrees that those two interests do not have to be pitted against one another. You actually need both.
And I can hang my hat on this. If I can get the population that knows nothing about trout... Oh, thank you. Somebody just commented on my trout hat. Guys, trout hats, smokingchimneys.com. Anyway, okay. If I can get people to appreciate a hatchery fish raised at my hatchery, and they can learn about that fish and the life cycle and all the things, how much more of an opportunity do they have to appreciate a wild fish? Mm-hmm. But if you have no context, and you're just going to be like, we need to save all the wild trout. You haven't done any educating. Where I am able to raise more awareness and therefore help wild trout conservation more with my trout hatchery than most people are just spouting off this and that. That's the fact of the matter, but I won't get on my high horse. But anyway.
No, I love the enthusiasm and passion. It's important because, yes, they say they deride the efforts of private individuals often. And then that's a greater problem we see in conservation all the time. The pitting against, consumptive practices versus conservation efforts, and they don't have to be pitted against one another. And they need both, because if there's no awareness, you're not going to get people excited about restoring wild fish if they have to be told that they can't eat trout, or that they can't do this. Like, you see people viscerally or negatively.
Look at the endangered, the mulefoot pigs and these different rare breeds of animals. How are we able to save those breeds? We start eating them. If you can make a certain, like mulefoot pigs, when they become desirable on menus, what happens? It creates a market for it. Then what happens? People start raising them. Well, all of a sudden, you've saved this whole breed because you've made it desirable. People don't like to hear that, but dude, that's the fact of the matter. So it's that same principle, but in the trout, if I can make the trout from my hatchery desirable, how much more are people set up to appreciate a wild fish, So
you'll see that support increase, I think, because when it creates I wouldn't say it's a monetization incentive, but people are more incentivized to care when they benefit, or they, let's say they're consumers of it. Like, someone who consumes delicious trout is going to be like, you know what, I support the efforts to raise them in this manner, and I want to see more of this. So when people are personally invested and they see how effective, let's say, your efforts are, or restoring wild fish are through these kind of creative means, definitely there will be more support. And we even see some debate over whether or not to kind of liberalize the sale of venison, because deer are so plentiful here in Virginia, as you know. So many road collisions.
Yeah.
Right now, you cannot sell wild game meat, understandably so, to prevent a wild game market. That almost wiped out white-tailed deer to extermination. We don't want that. But maybe there are going to be ways in the future to kind of normalize that with parameters, of course, so we don't have to get New Zealand venison or things like that. So people will know that the wild game source is from here, that you shouldn't hunt it to market game extirpation levels, and obviously not create like an underground black market where people are taking trout. Of course, that's not going to happen. That's not what you're advocating for, of course. But I think when people do see it harnessed like this and appreciate where it comes from, it's a slow kind of process, but people do understand it, and I think they'll understand where you're coming from about building up this appreciation and wanting to support efforts, private efforts especially, to have wild trout or trout in general proliferate more.
Yeah. It's a lot to unpack, and I'm more of a doer than a talker, but we have the ability to really, I believe we have the ability to change seafood here in America. It's amazing to me that, we're seeing all the salmon imported from Scandinavia and all the issues of all these, open pit salmon farms and etc. And I'm like, man, we are sitting on such a resource to be able to raise our own freshwater fish here in America to eat. Why are we getting salmon from Norway? And then it just turns into a whole thing about like, big food, and all that kind of stuff. But
I think consumers would be fine with paying a little more for trout that they knew was raised sustainably, safely here in the United States, and they knew that they were getting a quality product.
Snickers bar is $12 a pound. You know that?
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Doritos are $14 a pound.
Really?
You know that? So people bitch and complain about the price of a trout or whatever, but it's like, dude, you don't even know what you're paying for stuff per pound. Why is everything priced per unit? Because you can put air in the bag and put some chips in there, and you don't realize you're paying $15 a pound for potato chips, where meat, I don't know, I'm digressing, but you get my
misplaced
point.
Priorities.
Yeah, misplaced priorities, but then just not knowing. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know. So it's like, dude, if you're buying Snickers bars, like, you can buy decent trout, so.
When people come to smoke in Chimneys, do they have opportunities? I don't think you guys offer this, but I've fished at some other trout farms here in Virginia that are a little closer than you guys. If I was a little closer to Roanoke, I would try to come to you, buy directly. But do you guys think you would offer, let's say, because I think people want to see, maybe catch the trout for themselves. Will you offer some sort of opportunities, like create a separate pond, maybe with fish that are at maturity level, and then they could buy per pound, instead of just buying directly?
I've thought about it, and I'm not opposed to it. Mm-hmm. To be honest, it's just like a workflow thing. Then I got to have another guy there, and then I got to have certain days, and it's just a whole nother department that I would have to kind of like get going, So, and to be honest, this trout thing is my sole income. So I have to focus on the mechanisms of the business that like pay my bills, to be honest.
Right.
So I think we could in the future. It would be cool, but not right now, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What are some of the best trout recipes you've seen people use, or you and your family do, that you'd like people to try and replicate? Like, what dishes would you like to see people create with your trout?
Literally a whole fish. We only sell whole fish. I could get into why, but whole fish. Pull it out of our little bag. Salt, pepper, oil. Rub the whole fish down on the grill. Medium-high heat, 6 minutes aside. That's my favorite. The trout on the grill, dude, you're not gonna beat it. Once you start with good ingredients, like, you can't go wrong, 450 in the oven. That's probably the easiest. Then you don't got to get the grill going and all that kind of stuff. But it's literally so easy. And then the meat, like, you just get a fork and it falls right off the bone. So.
Do you recommend smoking?
Yeah. So you can go nuts with the stuff. So our smoked trout is like a 3-day brine. Pull it from the brine, and then we smoke it at 225 degrees for like an hour and a half. We pull it when the fish reaches 140. The smoked trout is phenomenal. We're using hickory right now. That's what we usually use. So we have like a stick burning smoker. It's a real deal. You're feeding the fire. We can do like 100 fish at a time. So it's a fun process.
Trout is delicious. I love it smoked. I love it grilled. I'll eat it anyway.
There's this whole tinned fish phase, like the sardine cans, mm-hmm. like that company Fish Wife and that tiny fish. I'm working on something to do the smoked trout, but it's in the shelf stable tins.
Interesting.
With like the cool packaging, and because right now all of our products, it's got to be frozen or it's got to be refrigerated. Mm-hmm. So we're working on something like that, like tuna, tuna fish at the grocery store. Something that's like shelf stable. So we're working on a product.
I'm familiar with kind of canned fish because my family's from Eastern Europe, so it's a really big staple, sardines or salmon. For sure. So it's very popular being stored in a can. So that's not too far off.
We're working on that. So.
Does Smoking Chimneys offer anything else besides raising trout? Because I know I've seen mentions of homesteading. Do you guys do any other things too?
Yeah, so like my wife, we're really big raw milk fans. My wife was lactose intolerant almost her whole life, and within a period of a couple months, like raw milk totally like recalibrated her whole like gut microbiome, and wasn't lactose intolerant anymore, didn't have gut issues. I could go on a whole sermon about that, but we're really big raw milk fans. Do like, yogurt and kefir and all that kind of stuff. I do like a garlic. My granddad, he like saved the same like garlic seed for like 25 years. So I've kept his garlic going. I'm not much of a gardener. We're more livestock people. Yeah, we used to do like 50 or 60 pigs a year, but we just kind of had to focus on like what we were good at. And the trout had like really gotten like momentum, and it was kind of a hard decision, but we still do some homestead stuff, but we had to let some of it go just to kind of focus on the trout.
You can only juggle so much.
Yeah. And if you have other things and you're not able to do it, then you have to justify hiring somebody. That means you have to have certain like production minimums to like justify having a person. And yeah, fresh meat every week is a tough thing. And I had to spend all my time and energy on keeping the accounts I had happy and working on a workflow to gain new accounts. So
your Christian faith is also really important to your business conduct. Mm-hmm. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, 100%. I had a lot of like major like mental health issues like in college, like just depression, suicidal thoughts. I just had a lot of I don't know what it was, honestly. I just had a lot of issues, and I just remember I got to a point where I was like, God, like if you're real, you gotta help me. I don't want to like live my whole life feeling out of control, like in my own mind, you know. And it wasn't overnight, but like whatever that was, it all like went away, and like I don't know, just like God like became like real to me. And this whole thing has been such a journey of faith. We've had so many issues and times where you're like, dude, I just literally need to go get a job. This is the stupidest project on the face of the earth. What am I doing? You know, but there's just that like voice. You're like, this is your path to walk, you know? So, and then just trying to run a small business and be a dad, a good dad, and a loving, kind husband has been extremely challenging. I've had so many moments where I'm like, God, I need your help to like balance all this, you know? So without my faith, I would just be doing something more straightforward with clear boundaries. Show up, do some stuff, do a good job, go home. My faith is like really like, it's like today, I'm coming up here to meet with all these restaurants. Are they going to like the trout? Are they not? Are they going to buy it? Are they not? I don't know. So even as far along as we are, there's still so many kind of like questions, but for me, God's just really used this whole journey to just, I think, make me like just a better person, and a person that I just needed these tough situations, because it's like the tough situations, that's what molds us and shapes us. It's not the successes. The successes are great, and that's like God's like, you know, little kisses to us, but it's the hard things which we don't really want to deal with or go through, but that's the things that really make us who we actually really want to be. So I've had to choose to be thankful for the process, and yeah, that's where my faith comes in.
It's good to have that. I think I've talked to a lot of people, and they say that faith can guide them, and especially in the outdoor industry too. You talk to so many people, and they say that having faith in God and faith in general really does help them steer forward. So it's not a bad thing to have. I think it's a welcome thing to have and a refreshing thing to have. Is there any kind of like final takeaway, Ty, that you have, a pitch about making people come visit Smoking Chimneys or maybe doing business with you all?
Yeah, okay, guys. We do 2 events a year, spring and fall. Our hatchery tour and taste event, it's amazing. We sell 80 tickets. We do a full tour of the hatchery. Our chefs there are doing like ridiculous food. You know, we have fire pits. It's amazing. It's Sunday, May 19th. That's at the hatchery. You can get tickets online at our website, smokingchimneys.com. We haven't announced it yet. We just confirmed we have a collaborative dinner with Chef Brian Voltaggio in Frederick, Maryland. At his restaurant,
the famous steakhouse,
Thatcher and Rye.
Okay.
Yeah, that's May 25th. No, I'm sorry. Jeez. May 20. I'm going to look. Hold up, guys. May. I don't know. We'll post it. It's that 3rd week of May. But yeah, come to the hatchery tour and taste. We also have an Airbnb on the property.
Do you?
If you want a weekend getaway. Come see the fish, come hang out. It's this really cool cabin. SmokingChimneys.com. We also, last thing, we ship our trout boxes to almost every state. We ship every Monday, so if you want to order, we have like a tasting box. You get some of the trout cakes, some fresh trout, some smoked trout, shipped right to your door. SmokingChimneys.com.
And social media, where can you follow you guys?
Instagram, at Smoking Chimneys. We're pretty active on there, posting videos about what we're doing, how we're doing it, and why we're doing it, and what we're doing, what we're not doing, and all the above. So, yeah.
We will include everything you've listed in the show notes, and I know we're going to make plans for me to come visit, and I would love to film at the property and even do more storytelling because I like what you guys are doing, and I really appreciate you coming to meet me here in the DC area while you're in town and chatting. It's good to get to know you.
Thanks so much for having me. This has been awesome.
Thanks for listening to District of Conservation. If you enjoyed what you heard today, go leave us some reviews on Apple and Spotify or wherever podcasts are played. Your feedback will help us reach more people, and I love to know what is on your mind after each episode. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter to never miss a beat or a guest announcement, because that is our way of updating all of you listeners, and we have just hit 1,000 followers on Instagram for the podcast account. Thank you very much. And if you have any guest suggestions or topics you want to hear on the show, I am all ears. I would love to hear your feedback there. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned for the next episode.